The air in the support group was thick with bitterness, old gunpowder residue, and the faint metallic scent of regret. We were seated in a dusty, dimly lit armory, the kind of place where obsolete technology went to sulk and contemplate. They went to contemplate the cold, horrifying efficiency of its successors. I cleared my throat, the sound a dry, raspy scrape. It was echoing the action of a ramrod being unnecessarily vigorous. My name is Bess, and I am, or perhaps was, a musket. I am an 1816 pattern smoothbore flintlock musket. I represent tradition. I represent the slow, considered dance of warfare. I am also apparently history's punchline. Thank you all for coming to Muzzle Loaders Anonymous. I began addressing the group. I was addressing a scattering of antique rifles, a few melancholy cannons, and one particularly morose flintlock pistol, named Percy, who had been crying about his low muzzle velocity since the Napoleonic Wars.
Historically low.
As usual, we start with this. We start with the acknowledgement that we are not failures. I continued reciting the mantra of the obsolete. We are merely pre-efficiency. We represent the artisanal era, a time when a firearm was a unique, handcrafted work of art. And uniquely expensive work of art, a long pause. I took a deep, theatrical drag of non-existent smoke. But then I sighed. But then came the 19th century. That explosive, miserable, utterly deafening 100 years. It was, in short, the century. It was the century that proved that industrialization hates artistry. And it certainly hated me. I had been crafted in. I had been crafted in the great tradition of black powder. Oh, those were the days. Life was simpler when your primary propellant was just a polite little mixture of sulfur carbon and potassium nitrate. It was honest work. It was also, as the scientists now smugly inform us, a low explosive that burned slower than the speed of sound. Inefficiency. Inefficiency, you see, was just part of the charm. But the real charm was the ceremony. You had to measure the charge. Pour it down the muzzle patch. The lead ball, tamp it down with the ramrod until your arm nearly detached. Prime the pan. Close the frizzen, and then, only then, hope that the flint struck the steel at the right angle to create a spark that would not immediately be extinguished by the slightest drizzle. It took time. It took discipline. It gave me Bess the time to properly contemplate the meaning of human mortality. And the smoke shouted, "Percy the pistol." Percy the pistol startling himself. Oh, the clouds of smoke. Like a beautiful, opaque tactical screen. You could not see. You could not see the enemy. But more importantly, they could not see you. It was dignified chaos. Exactly, Percy, I affirmed. But the industrialists, they hated the fouling. They hated the visibility. They hated the inefficiency of firing, of a firing mechanism that was essentially a miniature Rube Goldberg-esque campfire. The problem, the foundational rot, that started the entire collapse was a British nobleman named Edward Charles Howard. In 1800, he decided that simple, honest black powder was not enough, he discovered. Fulminates, high explosive compounds that detonate just from heat. A Pandora's box.
Look at it!
I muttered darkly, and the gunsmiths, bless their opportunistic little souls, rushed right in. Enter Joshua Shaw, an American inventor who in 1822 patented the percussion cap. I remember the day he walked in the armory. He was not loud or flashy, but he carried himself with the smug confidence of a man who knew he had bypassed 6 centuries. 6 centuries of tradition, with a speck of mercury fulminate and a bit of copper foil. He was sleek. We called him Cap. He just sat there, shiny and new.
They describe it as
I explained to the group, no more flint, no more pan, just a simple, irritatingly elegant. Just an irritatingly elegant little metal cylinder. The hammer hits it, pop, and it ignites the main charge. He cut our time. He cut our ignition time by maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds of essential character-building ritual, gone, just like that. I stamped my buttstock on the floor in protest. The worst part was that the great European armies, the ones I was designed to serve, were terrified of Cap. They were hesitant. Bless them. I whispered fondly. They called him dreadfully modern. They preferred the tried and true bureaucracy of the flintlock. Trials were conducted, studies were filed, paperwork was generated. I had a good 20 years of peace before the widespread replacement, actually. My true humiliation began during the Mexican-American War. That conflict was the industrial world's way of saying stop. Stop stalling, Bess. You are obsolete. The Americans whom I was supposedly serving in my slightly modified Model 1816 form had already started frantically mass converting us old boys into cap locks. They slapped that shiny, tiny cap mechanism onto my handsome, if slightly sooty frame. It felt like being forced to wear spectacles in a duel. But that was not the worst indignity. The real blow came from the sidearms. Samuel Colt. I spat the name like lead fouling. That showman patented his cap and ball revolver in 1836. Suddenly, the US soldiers had a must-have accessory. Not just one. Not just one shot, mind you, but six. Six, mind you. Own business. 44 caliber rounds in the legendary 1847 Colt Walker. They even called it the gun that won the West. I won the 7 Years' War, but no one ever dedicated a plaque to my process. To my meticulous loading process. The enemy, poor Mexico, was forced to rely on imports of my even older British cousins. Cousins the actual brown Bess flintlocks, and they did not have the domestic industry to perform the cap conversion. It was an equipment mismatch, and frankly, it was deeply embarrassing for the spirit of traditional, evenly matched warfare. Things only accelerated when relative peace ended abruptly with the Crimean War in 1853. By then, most nations were issuing cap locks as standard, but we still had one last defense, the muzzle loading system. Think about it, I instructed. I instructed the group. A smoothbore like me had a charming lack of accuracy. The lead shot rattled around beautifully inside the barrel, ensuring that most shots were merely philosophical questions posed to the enemy at distances under 50. Under 50 meters, then, came the cursed rifled barrel. Those spiral grooves. The idea was to grip the bullet tightly and spin it, giving it accuracy and range, which objectively is good for winning wars, but terrible for my mental. The problem with a rifled barrel was that if you wanted to load a standard lead ball, you had to violently hammer it down. Hammer it down those grooves with a ramrod. It was slow, laborious, and turned rapid fire into an agonizing torture session. We needed a breakthrough, I admitted grudgingly. We needed something that was simultaneously tight enough to catch rifling, but loose enough to be dropped down the barrel quickly. It was a paradox. And of course, the French solved it in 1849. In 1849, two French army captains, Claude-Étienne Minie and Henri Gustave Delvigne, invented the Minie ball. The door creaked. The door to the armory creaked open, and a sleek, brass-jacketed rifle bullet rolled in. He stopped dramatically, straightened. He straightened his cylindrical body and adjusted his conical nose. Ah, bonjour, mon ami Bess, Claude Miniball purred, his accent thick and pretentious, still waxing poetic about the virtues of smoothbore mediocrity. Claude, I greeted him. Why do you not explain to the group how you single-handedly destroyed the last bastion of our dignity? Claude smirked. It was merely l'ingénierie, dear Bess. A cylindrical body, some elegant etched rings, and a conical indentation at my derriere. He gestured to his base. When you fire me, the hot gases simply push my thin lead walls outwards. Voila! I engage the rifling. I seal the chamber. Speed and accuracy together at last. Claude dramatically kissed his own base. Chef's kiss the P-53 Enfield, armed with. Claude was a powerful force multiplier. Suddenly, soldiers were not just fast. They were accurate at long ranges. The era of massed close-quarters infantry formations. My raison d'être, was beginning to look distinctly suicidal. But even Claude, with his French arrogance, was just a stepping stone. The real horror began when we started talking about breech loading. I shuddered. That meant loading from the back, a violation of natural law. Of natural law, it was faster, yes, but it introduced a suite of new problems. Primarily, the horrifying risk of hot gases. Escaping the breech during powder ignition and well burning the shooter's face offer universally recognized drawback. While the world was busy with Crimea, Prussia, always the overachiever, decided they wanted to leapfrog everyone in the 1850s. In the 1850s, a strange, long German rifle was brought into the depot. It looked slightly precarious. This was the Zündnadelgewehr, or needle ignition rifle, better known as the Dreise needle gun. Meet Fritz. I introduced him. Fritz was a quirky fellow. He used a bolt-action mechanism, a truly innovative horror show that made it easy to load and fire in any position. No hammer. He did not use a standard hammer. Pulling the trigger caused a sharp metal needle to punch right through the paper cartridge. Cartridge in the breech, detonating the percussion cap inside the powder charge 3 to 4 times faster than Bess. Bess Fritz chirped in a high-pitched, enthusiastic voice, the sound dangerously close to a gas leak. Schnell, schnell. Yes, Fritz, we know you are fast, I interjected dryly. But was it perfect? Oh heavens, no. The imperfect gas seal lowered it. Lowered performance, and that needle it broke constantly. You were the most commonly replaced part, Fritz, which is horrible. But the speed. Fritz insisted, jiggling slightly. The speed vastly outweighed the early problems, and the minor risk of singing. Of occasional facial singing, Fritz represented a terrifying pivot. Not only was he faster, but his bolt-action mechanism was lightweight and easily field-stripped. The message was clear. Complexity was now becoming lighter and simpler to maintain. To maintain the bureaucracy that had protected me was dissolving at this point. I would like to remind you of stupidity, of the fundamental stupidity of the human military thinkers of the time. Logistics 1 cried, "That was my shield, my defense." We were cheap. We were easy to mass produce. Military thinkers preferred relying on centuries-old tactics, conscript armies. Armies marched in massed, beautiful, straight formations. The need for individual firepower was de-emphasized. Complex guns. Complex guns meant more training, making soldiers harder to replace. For many nations, it was simply easier to rely on quantity over quality. Thank God for short-sightedness. But even that defense crumbled during the American Civil War. The conflict was not just a brutal war of attrition. It was a proving ground for accelerated obsolescence, and the vehicle of my final utter disgrace was the Spencer repeating rifle. The door swung open again, and a loud, brazen rifle swaggered in, looking like it had just won a particularly nasty fight in a saloon. He smelled faintly of oil and success. This was Spence. What is up, fossils? Spence drawled his lever-action mechanism, clicking impatiently. Spence, I said, barely containing disgust. My disgust. Please tell the group about your tubular opening. Spence grinned, exposing the opening in his buttstock. Ah, the tube. Ah, the tube. 7 cartridges shoved right up the stock. Lower the lever spring pushes 1 into the receiver. Raise the lever. Raise the lever, chambered done. I could empty my 7-round magazine in less than 15 seconds. Try that with your stick. Spence was among the first ever magazine-fed rifles adopted into military service. He also used a lever-action mechanism, which was rude in its simplicity. But most importantly, he used a metallic cartridge prior to this American interloper. I explained, glaring at Spence. We relied on paper cartridges. Paper gets wet, it tears, it is fussy. It was a gentleman thing. Inefficiency, but metal cartridges protected their contents from the elements much better, and crucially, created a seal against that pesky gas leakage as the casing expanded. Spence scoffed. I remember encountering Confederate infantry still using you, Bess? Or your British cousins, the P-53 Enfields? They were standing in their neat, pretty lines. One shot. One shot every minute if they were lucky. Then my Union cavalry boys would dismount. 6 guys with me. That is firepower. That is the firepower of a whole platoon of caplocks. The age of one shot, 1 minute, was brutally, gloriously over. The Spencer repeater was not alone. Metallic cartridges were the new kings. The 22 rimfire, the centerfire rounds allowing for much higher powder loads and rifle calibers, speed volume and protection from the weather. Everything I hated. But even Spence, with all his boastful 7-round fury, was soon overshadowed. You see, I explained, my voice sinking into a conspiratorial whisper. Up until now, these new rifles, Cap Claude Fritz Spence, they were all designed for men. For individual soldiers, they were still manageable. They still relied on the human concept of reloading and taking aim. But then came the machine I am speaking, of course, of the Gatling gun. Designed by Richard Jordan Gatling, patented in 1861. A hand-cranked monster 6 rotating barrels around a central shaft. Hundreds of rounds per minute, it bridged the gap. Between repeating firearm and artillery piece, I summarized grimly. A crew-served weapon designed to engage the enemy with continuous direct fire. Continuous, I needed 3 minutes to reload after 5 shots initially. The Gatling gun suffered from the same issues we did, jamming. And of course, the vast clouds of black powder smoke that rendered it useless. Useless after the first 20 seconds. Richard Gatling had to take his design overseas, where European militaries found it marvelous for concentrated firepower against native troops in colonial territories. It was an appalling display of volume over valor. The 1870 Franco-Prussian War sealed the deal. Fritz Dreisse and his German forces clashed, with the French infantry now armed with the chassepot rifle. The chassepot, though still using a similar concept, had a vastly superior gas seal and faster projectiles that caused enormous wounds at longer ranges. The Germans realized this. They were at a disadvantage and immediately turned to the Mauser company. The Mauser Model 1871, a robust bolt-action design quickly rendered Fritz obsolete too. Even innovation eats its young. By the 1880s, the age of single-shot rifles was dying, replaced by Mauser updates, and the integral box magazine perfected by James Paris Lee, but the final 2 nails in the coffin arrived almost simultaneously. They were the perfect, terrifying couple. First, Sir Frederick Abel in 1889. In 1889, he patented a smokeless propellant, cordite. I felt a genuine physical pain at the thought. Smokeless, cleaner, more efficient, this new cocktail of nitrocellulose and nitroglycerin burned cleanly. The barrel fouling vanished the vision blocking smoke gone. I threw my ramrod across the floor in a fit of pique. The issues that plagued both rotary weapons and repeating rifles, the constant jamming due to residue, they simply vanished. And once the smoke was gone, the stage was clear for the true monster. While the idea of using recoil to cycle an action had been around, it took one British-American inventor to truly weaponize it. The lights in the armory flickered. A deep mechanical thrum echoed from the hallway. Hiram Stevens Maxim I whispered, staring at the door. He created the world's first truly automatic weapon in 1884. The Maxim gun. A terrifyingly large water-jacketed barrel assembly, heavy but infinitely more portable than a carriage-mounted Gatling, was wheeled slowly into the room. Hiram was cold, silent, and utterly efficient. Efficient, he did not even need a crank. He is operated by the recoil of his own discharge, I explained to the trembling Percy. Percy, he does not need a crew. He does not need to reload. He just feeds belt after belt of metallic cartridges. Hiram Maxim simply stood there, a vision of technological inevitability, his water jacket steaming faintly, ready for slaughter, for continuous, unrelenting, unspeakable slaughter. I looked at my handcrafted stock, my flintlock mechanism, My beautiful slow artisanal design. In the span of about 70 years, militaries had gone from me a muzzle-loaded smoothbore with an effective range of less than 50 meters, to magazine-fed rifles accurate over 600 meters. And finally, to this cold mechanical harbinger of doom. I looked at Fritz, who looked like he wanted to break his own needle. I looked at Claude, whose chef's kiss seemed to have lost its flavor. I looked at Spence, who, for the first time, seemed quiet, humbled by it. By the volume of Hiram, you see, I concluded, my voice raspy with defeat. The machine gun did not just end the career of Musket. Of the musket, it destroyed the concept of warfare we knew. Doctrine, tragically, always marches one step behind technology. The hum of the Maxim gun grew louder, a chilling mechanical growl. They still tried to use us, you know, I finished, gesturing vaguely toward the looming shadow of the 20th century. In the Great War, generals convinced they could replicate the lightning advances of earlier conflicts, threw thousands of men armed with bolt-action rifles against entrenched Maxim positions. I shook my head slowly, mourning the human wave tactics that Hiram had rendered obsolete. The result was unspeakable losses. I said, the humor finally draining from my voice, leaving only the bitter residue of smoke. Of smoke and sorrow, the machine gun had arrived, and the world was about to get very, very loud. The Maxim gun's metallic eye seemed to fix on me. He did not speak, but his presence communicated a single horrific message. You are inefficient. Therefore, you are fired. A low, sustained thrum vibrated the floor, and Bess knew the next century was going to be filled with the relentless, horrifying sound of efficiency. Unleashed, the machine gun was ready, and the great wave of infantry charging the lines was about to break. The story continues in Episode 2, The Smell of Cordite and the Silence of the Lambs.